I woke to the piercing scream of my land, a sound so visceral it wasn't some poetic flourish, but the raw, brutal truth of chaos unfolding just beyond my window. The deep growl of engines rumbled through the air, punctuated by the sickening crunch of wheat stalks snapping beneath monstrous tires, while faint whoops and laughter drifted in, mocking, careless, the soundtrack of people who'd never known a day of real labor. My head throbbed as every noise drilled into me. I shot upright, heart slamming against my ribs, and yanked on my boots, shoving the door open with a force that rattled the hinges before sprinting outside, my mind lagging behind my eyes, refusing to process the madness I was about to witness. There it was, a swarm of ATVs, at least a dozen rampaging through my wheat field like feral beasts unleashed in a fragile shop, kicking up clouds of dust and golden chaff as their tires gouged deep scars into the soil I'd spent months nurturing. The destruction was instant. Rows of painstakingly tended crops flattened, stalks torn from their roots, my once pristine field reduced to a wasteland of reckless ruin. Leading this horde of havoc was none other than Karen, the self-anointed queen of the HOA, her blonde bob flapping wildly beneath her helmet as she whipped her ATV in frenzied circles, grinning like she'd hit the jackpot on some twisted game show. My fists clenched so hard my knuckles whitened, my jaw locking until I swore my teeth might shatter. Karen, of course it was Karen, the woman who'd made tormenting me her personal crusade since I'd settled here, always shoving absurd HOA rules down my throat despite my farm sitting firmly outside her so-called domain. Now she'd escalated her war, and I stormed forward, arms flailing like a madman, shouting over the roar. "Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?" Only to be met with more laughter, engines revving louder, and the relentless shredding of my wheat as her gang plowed on, oblivious or indifferent to my fury. Karen locked eyes with me, her smirk sharpening as she steered her ATV right up to my feet, yanking off her helmet with a dramatic flourish and tossing her hair like she was auditioning for a haircare ad. "Oh, relax, farm boy," she sighed, waving a dismissive hand as if I were overreacting to a spilled coffee. "It's just a field." My vision blurred with rage, just a field. The months of grueling work, the endless hours of watering, the meticulous care, all dismissed as trivial by this insufferable woman. I sucked in a breath, forcing my temper to hold, and snapped back. "This isn't some community park, Karen. This is my land, my crops, and you're destroying it." Then Bob, her equally unbearable husband, rolled up beside her, his gut straining his polo shirt, snorting as he shook his head. "Oh, come on, Jake, wheat's just fancy grass, it'll grow back," prompting a chorus of guffaws from their HOA posse like it was the punchline of the year. My fingers twitched, itching to grab something, anything, to make them grasp the gravity of their actions, and I growled through gritted teeth. "You're trespassing, get off my land now." Karen gasped theatrically, clutching her chest as if I'd wounded her delicate sensibilities. "Trespassing? Oh, sweetheart, you don't understand how things work around here," she purred, gesturing to her crew with a smugness that made my skin crawl. "This land, under HOA jurisdiction, we approved it as a recreational area." I stared, dumbfounded, before a disbelieving laugh escaped me. "Are you out of your mind? This is my private farm." But she just rolled her eyes, brushing me off with a flippant, "Tomato, tomato, HOA rules still apply," as if her word could rewrite reality itself. Karen's smug declaration hung in the air like a bad smell, her unwavering confidence twisting my gut as she tilted her head, clearly reveling in her imagined authority, while the ATVs behind her kept up their relentless assault, engines snarling, more dirt and wheat stalks flying in a chaotic dance of destruction. "According to our latest community newsletter," she went on, her voice dripping with condescension, "this field's now an outdoor activity zone." My eye twitched at the absurdity. A newsletter didn't rewrite property deeds, but she spoke with such conviction it was as if she believed she could bend the world to her will. My pulse hammered in my ears, breaths coming in short, furious bursts, not just from her audacity but from the sheer gall of her delivery. And as another rumble shook the ground, my patience snapped like a dry twig. Without a word, I yanked my phone from my pocket and started recording, the lens catching every smug grin and revving engine. Karen's eyes narrowed, her tone sharpening. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer, too busy dialing the police, and as the call connected, Bob's obnoxious laughter erupted, loud and grating. "Oh man, that's rich. Go ahead, call them. Let's see how that works out for you." I ignored him, jaw tight, turning my back as I pressed the phone to my ear. "Yes, officer, I need immediate assistance. Multiple trespassers on my property, actively destroying my crops." Karen snorted, but a faint edge of uncertainty crept into her voice. "Oh, come on, Jake, you're really going to waste police time on this?" I spun to face her, phone still recording. "You seem awfully confident for someone about to have a trespassing charge on her record." And her smirk faltered just for a heartbeat as the dispatcher's voice crackled through. "We're sending officers now. Stay put." I hung up, pocketing the phone, and fixed my gaze on Karen and her HOA circus, the tension stretching taut between us. She broke first, swinging her leg over her ATV with a huff, chin lifting defiantly. "Fine, we'll leave." Bob's face twisted in disbelief. "What?" I said, "We're leaving." She snapped, shooting him a glare. "I'm not dealing with some overzealous cop who doesn't get community rights." Bob grumbled, but he fired up his engine, the rest of the gang following with less enthusiasm. And one by one they peeled out, tearing through what little remained of my field in a final act of spite before vanishing down the road. I exhaled slowly, willing my racing heart to calm, staring at the wreckage. My crops, my sweat, my months of toil, all trampled into a muddy mess under their careless tires. My fists curled tight as the distant wail of sirens sliced through the silence, and I turned to see a patrol car rolling up, lights flashing red and blue against the dirt. It stopped in my driveway, and I stood there, arms crossed, still simmering with rage as the driver's door swung open. Officer Harris stepped out, a stocky man with a weary look that said he'd seen too many of this town's petty wars, followed by his younger partner, Reed, who took one glance at the field and let out a low whistle. "Looks like a war zone." I nodded, teeth clenched. "That's exactly what it is." And Harris adjusted his belt, fixing me with a steady gaze. "All right, Jake, walk me through what happened." So I did, spilling every detail from the moment those ATVs roared in to the second I called for help, every smirk, every flippant remark from Karen and Bob laid bare, my voice steady despite the fire burning in my chest. I recounted the whole fiasco to Officers Harris and Reed, my voice tight but controlled, laying out the invasion of ATVs, Karen's smug leadership, and Bob's idiotic quips, watching their faces grow grimmer with every word until I finished, the weight of the ruined field behind me pressing on my shoulders. Harris sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. "And you're saying they claimed this was HOA approved?" I nodded sharply. "Karen said she had paperwork proving my land under their jurisdiction." Reed let out a bark of laughter. "That's not how property laws work." And I gritted out, "Exactly. She acted like her newsletter could override my deed." Harris turned to his cruiser, grabbing his radio. "Dispatch, send a unit to Karen Dalton's residence, possible trespassing and property destruction charges." And as the radio crackled back a confirmation, Reed glanced at the ATV tracks snaking toward the neighborhood. "You got any security cameras out here?" A faint spark of hope flickered in me. I'd installed them after the HOA's last stunt, and I pulled out my phone, opening the feed, caught everything. Reed leaned in as I played the footage, the screen showing the ATVs tearing through my wheat, Karen's face crystal clear as she spun donuts, Bob and the gang whooping like kids at a carnival, and then the clincher, Karen boldly declaring the HOA had sanctioned it all. Harris whistled low. "That's some strong evidence," and I narrowed my eyes, "strong enough to press charges." He swapped a look with Reed before nodding, "Definitely." The moment was cut short by another car approaching, a second cruiser pulling up, and out stepped Officer Daniels, a no-nonsense woman whose stern expression promised zero patience for HOA entitlement. She marched over. "Where, Karen?" Harris jerked a thumb toward the neighborhood. "At her house, I assume you want to go chat?" Daniels nodded, then turned to me. "Jake, you pressing charges?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," and she gave a curt nod before heading back to her car, peeling off with purpose while Harris and Reed lingered, snapping photos of the wreckage. They patted my shoulder before leaving, Harris saying, "We'll keep you updated. Just hang tight." And as their cruiser vanished down the road, I stood alone in my ravaged field, anger still simmering but laced with a growing satisfaction. Karen wasn't slipping away this time. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Harris. "Karen's detained for questioning. Tried using fake HOA documents as a defense. Didn't go well." And I laughed aloud, shaking my head at her gall, imagining her waving some shoddy printout like it was a royal decree. The sun dipped low when another message pinged, this time from my neighbor Sam. "Dude, Karen just got escorted out by cops. HOA's losing it." I grinned, picturing the chaos, and the next morning I drove into town for supplies, stopping at the diner for coffee, the place humming with gossip. "Did you hear about Jake's farm? Karen thought she could take it. She's finally getting hers." Their words buzzing around me as I smirked into my cup. My satisfaction evaporated the moment I stepped outside. Bob stood by my truck, arms crossed, face sour as curdled milk, growling, "You think this is funny?" I sipped my coffee unfazed. "Yeah, actually I do." He stepped closer, trying to loom over me despite his ridiculous boat shoes and golf shirt. "You just made a big mistake, Jake." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah, what mistake's that?" He leaned in, voice low. "You think Karen's the only one with power here? We're going to make your life hell." And I laughed, shaking my head. "Bob's, you already tried. Look where it got you." Bob's face flushed a furious red, his threat hanging between us like a cheap bluff. But before he could spit another word, a siren whooped nearby, a patrol car cruising through the diner parking lot, and he faltered, stepping back with a muttered curse before storming off, his boat shoes slapping the pavement. I watched him go, finishing my coffee with a sigh. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As I drove home, my eyes stayed sharp on the road, mind churning through what might come next. Knowing the HOA had crossed me once and wouldn't hesitate to try again, but this time I'd be ready. The next morning, I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, gazing at my battered wheat field. The sight still twisted my stomach, not just from the damage, but from the nagging certainty that Karen and her minions weren't done. Bob's parking lot bravado stuck in my head like a splinter. And if I'd learned anything, it was that these people didn't take defeat gracefully. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. Harris again. "Karen's facing fines, trespassing, destruction, attempted fraud. She's not happy." I chuckled, picturing her fuming, steam practically pouring from her ears. A woman so used to bulldozing her way through life now smacking into a legal wall she couldn't charm or bully past. I'd barely set the phone down when a sharp, hissing noise cut through the quiet. My gut clenched. It wasn't natural, too deliberate. And I set my mug on the railing, rounding the house with a growing dread, eyes scanning until they landed on the source. My irrigation pipes, slashed open, water gushing in wild arcs, soaking the dirt and drowning my plants. My fists balled up as I crouched, fingers tracing the deep, jagged cuts. This wasn't wear or accident. It was sabotage, and I straightened, scanning the empty fields, seeing no one but knowing exactly who'd done it. Karen might be under watch, but Bob had been a coiled spring yesterday, desperate and dumb enough to pull this. I whipped out my phone and dialed Harris, skipping pleasantries when he picked up. "They sabotaged my irrigation." He sighed, frustration thick in his voice. "You got proof?" "I have cameras," I said, already striding toward the barn where my security system hummed. "I'll check the footage." "Send me anything you find," Harris replied. "If it's them, they just dug a deeper hole." And I hung up, stepping into the barn, my pulse quickening as I pulled up the feeds, eyes darting over the screens while I fast-forwarded through the night. It didn't take long, too. 4:43 a.m., two figures crept onto my land, dark clothes not hiding their clumsy intent as they slunk toward the irrigation setup. I slowed the footage, squinting, then smirked. Bob and Greg, another HOA lackey, their faces plain as day, no masks, no brains. Bob wielded a knife, slashing at the pipes with a smug grin while Greg played lookout, twitching like a nervous kid. I could almost hear Bob's muttered gloating through the grainy video, and I clipped it fast, firing it off to Harris before stepping back outside, arms crossed, waiting. Minutes later, my phone rang. "Harris, Kurt, we're on our way." And soon enough, two patrol cars rolled up, Harris climbing out with Daniels, her face a mask of irritation as she muttered, "They really don't know when to quit, do they?" "Apparently not," I replied, and Harris nodded toward my field. "We're going to Bob's. You want to come?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I do," ready to see this through. 15 minutes later, we pulled into Bob's driveway, his house a textbook shrine to HOA arrogance. Manicured lawn, twin SUVs gleaming like trophies, and a flagpole hoisting an HOA banner that flapped like he ruled some petty fiefdom. I sat in the back of Harris's cruiser, watching as he and Daniel strode to the door, their knocks sharp and unyielding. It took a moment, but Bob finally appeared, his expression sliding from mild irritation to stark panic when he spotted me with the officers. He stepped onto the porch, forcing a laugh. Sure, officers. What's this about?" Daniels crossed her arms, voice flat. "Want to explain why you and Greg were trespassing on Jake's property last night, or why you took a knife to his irrigation system?" Bob's face drained of color, his eyes flicking to me then back to her. "That's ridiculous. I was home all night." But Daniels didn't flinch, pulling out her phone and tapping the screen until the damning video played, Bob and Greg caught in grainy glory, slashing pipes with smug abandon. His mouth flapped open and shut, face reddening as he stammered. Okay, look, this is blown out of proportion. It was just a prank. We didn't break anything serious." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "You cut through irrigation pipes." And Bob let out a strangled chuckle. "They can be fixed. It's not like we burned his house down." Harris shook his head. "That's not how this works, Bob. You're facing charges, trespassing, destruction of property, vandalism." Bob's bravado crumbled, shoulders slumping as he pleaded, "Come on, man, there's got to be a way to work this out." But Harris was unmoved. "There is, you come with us." And as Bob cursed under his breath, they cuffed him. Then Greg appeared in the doorway, pale as a ghost, not even bothering to argue, just holding out his wrists like a man resigned to his fate. I watched them get loaded into the cruiser, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. The HOA's reign was cracking, and this time they'd tripped over their own stupidity. We drove back, Harris glancing at me in the rear view. "You good?" I nodded. "Better now." And he smirked, dropping me off at my porch where I stood, staring at my field, the slashed pipes still leaking but the weight of their defeat lifting some of the sting. 2 days later, the fallout hit hard. Karen was forced to resign as HOA president, her fake documents and entitled bluster no match for the law. Bob and Greg pleaded guilty, coughing up fines that must have gutted their bank accounts. And the HOA board got a long overdue overhaul, new leaders stepping in to replace the old guard's iron grip. The neighborhood exhaled, free from Karen's delusions for the first time in years, and with the settlement cash I won, I patched up my field. New irrigation, repaired soil, a fresh start. But the best part came when I planted a little surprise amid the golden wheat. A scarecrow, tall and proud, with Karen stitched across its chest in bold letters. The first time she drove by and saw it, her car swerved, rage twisting her face as she sped off, and I just smiled, tipping my hat. Petty, sure, but damn, it felt good. It was a quiet victory, a middle finger to her reign, and as the sun set over my recovering crops, I knew I'd weathered their storm. The days after the scarecrow went up felt like a ceasefire, the air around my farm quieter than it had been in months, the wheat slowly healing under a new irrigation system funded by the HOA's begrudging settlement. I'd sip my coffee on the porch each morning, eyeing that stitched Karen swaying in the breeze, a silent sentinel of my win. But peace with people like them never lasts. Midweek, my phone buzzed with a text from Sam, my neighbor who'd relished the HOA's meltdown. "Heads up, HOA's holding an emergency meeting tonight. Word is they're plotting something." My gut tightened, the old wariness creeping back, because if Karen's fall and Bob's fines hadn't taught them humility, nothing would. I thanked Sam and spent the day working the field, but my mind kept drifting. Plotting what? Another land grab. Revenge, and by dusk, I decided to find out, grabbing my keys and heading to the community center where their meetings droned on like petty tribunals. I wasn't a member, but I'd be damned if I let them scheme behind my back unchecked. I slipped into the back of the dimly lit room, folding my arms as the new HOA president. A wiry guy named Paul, who'd always hovered in Karen's shadow, banged a gavel to hush the muttering crowd. About 24 residents sat there, some fidgeting, others glaring my way when they spotted me. Guess my scarecrow had made the rounds. Paul cleared his throat. "We're here to address recent disruptions. Our community's unity has been tested, and certain individuals," his eyes flicked to me, "have overstepped." I smirked, unfazed, as he droned on about restoring order. But then he dropped the bomb. "We've filed a petition with the county to rezone Jake's farm as communal green space, legal and binding this time." My smirk vanished, replaced by a cold fury. Communal green space. My private land? And the room buzzed with murmurs, a few nods from the old Karen loyalists, though others looked uneasy. Paul held up a stack of papers. We've got signatures, precedent, and a lawyer says it's airtight. I stood, voice cutting through the hum. You're delusional if you think I'll let you steal my farm with a petition. Paul flinched but recovered. It's not stealing, Jake, it's progress. Your field's an eyesore now anyway. An eyesore they'd made, and my fists clenched as I shot back. It's my property, not your playground. Try this, and I'll bury you in court. The room went silent, Paul's confidence wavering, but a familiar voice piped up. Bob slouched in the front row, sneering. We've got the numbers, farm boy, good luck fighting the whole town. I locked eyes with him. Numbers don't rewrite deeds, Bob. You're about to learn that the hard way again. A few residents shifted uncomfortably, maybe sensing the legal quicksand their new leader was wading into, and I turned to leave, pausing at the door. I've got cameras, lawyers, and a hell of a lot more patience than you think. Step on my land again, and you'll regret it. Driving home, my pulse thrummed with a mix of rage and resolve. They weren't just after my field now, they wanted to erase my rights to it, but I'd fought off Karen's chaos and Bob's knives. This was just another battle, and I was ready. By morning, I'd called my lawyer, a grizzled guy named Tom who'd handled my settlement, and laid out their scheme. He laughed. A petition? Against a deeded farm? They're dreaming. Let's hit them hard. Tom's gruff laugh over the phone was a lifeline, his confidence cutting through the knot of anger twisting my gut as I paced my porch. The morning sun glinting off the scarecrow still defiantly labeled, Karen, amidst my recovering wheat. A rezoning petition against private farmland, he said. They've got no leg to stand on. Give me a day to draft a counterclaim, and we'll make them sorry they tried. I hung up, exhaling a slow breath, the fight ahead sharpening my focus. Karen might be out, Bob might be fined, but the HOA's new guard was just as stubborn, and I wasn't about to let them chip away at what was mine. By noon, I'd pulled every document I had, deeds, tax records, even old surveys proving my land's boundaries, and sent them to Tom, then headed to the field, checking the irrigation and soil, refusing to let their threats derail the work I'd clawed back from ruin. If they wanted a war, they'd get one, but on my terms this time. That evening, Sam swung by, leaning against his truck with a grin. Heard you crashed their meeting. Paul's rattled, says you're bluffing about a lawyer. I smirked. Let him think that. He'll see soon enough, and Sam nodded. Half the neighborhood's sick of their crap anyway. Keep pushing, Jake. The next day, Tom called back, voice brimming with relish. Filed an injunction with the county, blocks their petition cold until a hearing, added a harassment suit against the HOA for good measure, trespassing, sabotage. Now this? They're toast. I grinned, picturing Paul's wiry frame shrinking under a stack of legal papers, and thanked Tom before stepping outside, the weight of their scheme lifting as I surveyed my land, not an eyesore, not communal, but mine, earned through sweat and grit. Word spread fast. By afternoon, my phone pinged with a text from Harris. HOA's lawyer just called the station, fishing for dirt on you, sounded desperate. I chuckled, replying, let them dig, they'll find nothing but their own graves, and Harris shot back, keep your cameras rolling. That night, I double-checked the security feeds, the barn's monitors humming as I scanned for any sign of Bob or his cronies. Nothing yet, but I wasn't naive. Desperation bred stupidity, and they'd already proven they didn't learn. Sure enough, dawn broke with a new twist. I stepped outside to a faint, acrid smell, my nose wrinkling as I followed it to the field's edge. A patch of wheat, maybe 10 feet wide, scorched black, the soil reeking of gasoline. My jaw tightened. This wasn't natural, wasn't lightning. It was arson, petty and bold, and I grabbed my phone, pulling the footage from the night. 3:17 a.m., a lone figure in a hoodie splashing liquid from a can, then a flare of light. Too grainy for a face, but the build screamed Greg Bob's shadow in every dumb stunt. I sent it to Harris and Tom, fury simmering as I called the cops again. Within an hour, Daniels rolled up, her stern face darkening at the burn. They're escalating, stupid but predictable. She took photos, bagged soil samples, and promised a warrant for Greg's place. I nodded, arms crossed. They think they can scare me off, they're wrong. And she smirked. Oh, they'll figure that out soon. By midday, Tom called again. County's fast-tracking the hearing, your injunction's solid, and this arson puts the HOA in a vice. We're demanding damages now, big ones. I smiled grimly, staring at the scarecrow. Karen's legacy was crumbling, and her successors were next. This wasn't just my land anymore, it was my line in the sand. The scorched patch of wheat stared back at me like a taunt, but I stood firm on my porch, coffee in hand, the morning air thick with the promise of a reckoning as Daniel's cruiser peeled out, her evidence bag stuffed with the HOA's latest blunder. Tom's words echoed in my head, damages, a vice. And I knew this wasn't just about saving my farm anymore, it was about ending their reign for good. By afternoon, Harris texted, "Greg's in custody, gas can in his garage matched the burn. He's singing, says Bob put him up to it." I smirked, picturing Greg's nervous twitch cracking under pressure, and replied, "Nail Bob too," already imagining his red face twisting when the cuffs clicked. Tom called an hour later, voice sharp with triumph. "Hearings tomorrow, county's pissed about the arson. HOA's petition's dead and we're countersuing for everything. Harassment, property damage, legal fees, they're drowning." I nodded to myself. Good, let's finish it, and spent the evening prepping with him, every deed and camera clip a brick in the wall I'd build to bury them. The hearing dawned crisp and clear. I drove to the county courthouse, Tom at my side, his briefcase stuffed with ammo as we walked into a room buzzing with tension. Paul sat with the HOA's lawyer, a slick guy in a cheap suit, while Bob slouched beside them, avoiding my gaze, his bravado gone. The judge, a gray-haired woman with no patience for nonsense, didn't waste time. "I've reviewed the injunction, the footage, the arson report. HOA's petition lacks legal grounding. Private property isn't rezoned by newsletters or spite." And Paul stammered, "But the community," before she cut him off, "community doesn't trump deeds, sit down." Tom laid out our case. Trespassing, sabotage, now arson, each point backed by video and police reports, and when their lawyer tried to spin it as neighborhood disputes, the judge's glare shut him up. She ruled fast. Petition denied, injunction permanent, HOA liable for damages, 6 figures plus fees, and I watched Paul's face crumple, Bob's hands clench, the fight draining out of them. Back home, the settlement check arrived weeks later. Enough to fix the field, upgrade security, and then some. And I stood in the wheat, the scarecrows, Karen, stitching faded but defiant, a monument to their collapse. The HOA disbanded soon after, too broke and humiliated to limp on, new leaders washing their hands of the old guard's mess. Sam stopped by, grinning, "Town, calling you the HOA slayer. Karen's moved to her sister's, Bob's selling the house." I laughed, "Good riddance," and he clapped my shoulder. "You one man, nobody's crossing you again." The field healed over months, golden stalks rising where ruts and burns had scarred it, and I added a second scarecrow, labeled Bob, just for kicks. Driving by, folks waved now, not glared, the gossip shifting from my fight to their folly, and I let it fade, content with the quiet. One evening I sat on the porch, sun dipping low, the wheat swaying gentle and whole. No engines, no threats, just my land, mine in every way that mattered. The fight had cost time, sweat, maybe a little faith in people, but it had forged something stronger, a boundary they'd never breach again. I raised my mug to the scarecrows, a silent toast to the chaos they'd outlasted, and smiled. Peace wasn't just the absence of war, it was knowing I'd won it, stalk by stalk, deed by deed on my terms.